First of all, what is modernity? Modernity was developed in the US and Europe in the late 19th and 20th centuries. It refers to the Age of Enlightenment in the 16th century and its emphasis on rationality. Modernization began in cities like Paris, Vienna, Chicago, and New York, but later spread beyond the Western world through Western colonization. Alternative modernity arises in new cities as modernist ideas are accepted, rejected, or blended with existing culture to create a new experience of modernity. It theorizes that different parts of the world experience modernity in their own way and at their own time. Alternative modernity is prominent in territories of the world that are influenced by the West but still retain their own cultural values. One city that exhibits alternative modernity is Shanghai. Shanghai was a treaty port where foreign trade took place. It became a zone in which both Westerners and Chinese lived in the same territory but lived separate lives. Western influence in Shanghai became prominent and manifested itself through buildings. Banks, hotels, churches, cinemas, coffee houses, restaurants, deluxe apartments, and a race course. They were the concrete manifestations of Western material civilization due to almost a century of Sino-Western contact. The strong Western prominence in Shanghai advanced its infrastructure to be on par with modern cities of the West. By the 1930s, Shanghai had become known as the Paris of Asia for its cosmopolitan metropolis. It was modernization in a way that blended old with new and Western with Chinese, thus representing alternative modernity's ideals. Many of the locals, however, held a negative opinion on this modernity. They saw Shanghai as a city of imperialism, focused on exploiting the urban lower classes. To the Chinese, Western modernization was a threat to their existing culture. But over time, Western architecture made its way into Chinese buildings and housing, blending traditional Chinese styles with Western modernism. An example of alternative modernity in Shanghai would be the Shikam residence. The Shikam residence is an example of the typical house style in Shanghai. These residences employ styles of architecture from both China and Western countries. They are usually two-floor buildings made from traditional Chinese brick, black tiles, and wood. The interior space reflects Chinese architecture, and the overall design is heavily influenced by courtyard-style homes in southern China. The exterior, however, is a block style similar to Western townhouses. The residences are linked together, connected by common paths and shared patios. Shikam residences employ elements of alternative modernity in that the exterior and organization of the buildings were influenced by Western culture, but the interior aesthetics and functions remained grounded in traditional Chinese culture. Across the world, Brazil experiences its own forms of alternative modernity. Lina Bobardi was an Italian-Brazilian architect and writer known for her 20th century Brazilian architecture. She was born in 1914 Italy and studied architecture at the University of Rome. She met Pietro Maria Bardi, a critic and art historian, and eventually moved with him to Rio de Janeiro. Lina Bobardi became fascinated by Brazilian culture and began to study it, with a specific interest in the convergence of art and popular tradition. Her first architectural project was completed in 1950. The Casa de Vidro, or House of Glass, was a house in a neighborhood outside of São Paulo. She took inspiration from Le Corbusier, incorporating each of his 5 points for a new architecture, and takes a lot from modern Western architecture. The building also embraces the Brazilian nature around it, with wide windows to view the surrounding environment and pilotis that attempt to blend in with the trees. Lina Bobardi was later commissioned to design a new museum of art in São Paulo. Her one restriction was that she could not block the panoramic vistas of the site. She solved this by splitting the building in two, one half buried underground and the other raised in the air. The style of the art museum, similar to the glass house, was very modern and Western. It was a simple rectangular block with no embellishments, and again includes Le Corbusier's 5 points. Lina Bobardi exemplified alternative modernity by designing with the principles of Western modernism, while still embracing the existing city by allowing the vistas to be viewed how the locals intended them to be. In conclusion, alternative modernity was the result of modernization in cities that arose from a neo-Western ideology. It took shape as countries adopted technological innovations and improvements while still keeping with native traditions and practices. Alternative modernities have played a great role in shaping the world we live in today, both for the better and for the worse. Though instances of alternative modernity have resulted in improved infrastructures in cities like Shanghai and Sao Paulo, they also put pressure on the native people to subsume Western culture and ideology, and while the cultural intersectionality produced by alternate modernities can result in innovation, as is evident in Lina Bobardi's architecture, it can also lead to segregation and inequality between groups of people as Western powers gain influence over foreign territories. Looking forward, it is important to be mindful of how the implementation of architectural modernities affects communities as a whole, so we can live in more cohesive and accepting environments.